Hello and welcome to the second in CMEC's Conservative Party Conference 2025 debate series. Today we're going to do something particularly un-British and big ourselves up. We're going to have a look at the UK's soft power, the capabilities and the advantages and the culture and the heritage that we have, and how we can better leverage it in the world and in the Middle East in particular. I'm Charlotte Leslie and I am the Director of the Conservative Middle East Council. With us today, I'm really privileged to welcome some amazing guests. To my left, we have Omar Bdour. Omar is the CEO of London Arabia organisation, and Omar's ambition is to increase cultural and business links between Britain and the Arab world and foster relationships. And in today's increasingly globalised and intercultural world, it's vitally important to understand other cultures in business. Omar has a magazine that London Arabia produces you'll find on your seats. Please do grab a copy if you haven't got one. And London Arabia is a pioneering and a brilliant organisation. To my right, Tony Davis is someone who you will find out more about as he explains who he is through a video. Someone I first met through boxing, which is not something you'll probably always expect to hear in a Middle East discussion. And particularly on the day that you may remember the Westminster attack where PC Palmer was murdered, Tony was a first responder there and has an amazing story to tell about how he went on from that tragedy to be an absolute pioneer of building relationships with Britain and Bahrain. But you'll see more about that later. He is a professional boxing coach, educator and manager, and has led the coaching staff of Great Britain, England and military boxing teams and set up boxing in its entirety in Bahrain and proudly served the GB boxing programme as a world-class programme coach. And finally, to my far right, but only in position, is Nicholas Hopton, who is the Director General of the Middle East Association. He was educated at St Peter's, York and Magdalen College, Cambridge, joined the Foreign and Commonwealth Office in 1989 and has served in Paris, Rome and Rabat, and in 2012 was appointed UK Ambassador to Yemen, followed by ambassadorial postings in Qatar, Iran and Libya. So there's very little that Nicholas doesn't know about diplomacy and the Middle East. I'm going to start off by asking each of the panellists to say a little bit about their perspective on Britain's role in the world and how we can leverage our history and culture and soft power. And Omar, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us a bit about who you are, what London Arabia does and why you set it up?
Oh, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here and thank you all for coming. Your Excellency, maybe you can come here to the front. Love you.
We're very honoured to be joined by the Ambassador of Turkey, Your Excellency. You're very, very welcome.
Yeah. Yeah, please. Yeah. Thank you everyone for coming. Thanks. Charlotte is doing great work, and I always say that she's doing a marvelous work. And before we start, I would like you to join me to give her a round of applause because she's doing a fantastic job at CMEC. What we do at London Arabia, we started with Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson was the first one to support us in 2014, which is a surprise to everyone. I don't know. At that time, he was doing great work between London and the Arab world, trying to bring more investments, and soft power was very, very important in terms of working with Arab institutions, bringing more visitors to London, more investments. What we do at London Arabia, we try to do different activities and different events around empowerment of Arab women and the connection between the UK and the Arab world. We have an event around tourism, that's always in November, just before the World Travel Market. And we have our very small membership club, which is, we are very, very honored and proud to have people who, some of our founding members like Harrods, like Cadogan States and the Jumeirah Group and others. So that's what we do. And I myself, been here in the UK for 25 years, and I always ask people to trust me, but I failed, so I put it in writing, and I wrote a book called Trust Me, I'm an Arab. So, and that's what we do. But in terms of soft power, I think this is a very, very important subject, and I didn't know when we started our work that's soft power. I started it because we believe that's very important to connect London and the Arab world. So when you speak about soft power, many people will think the American, or always the American said, oh, we invented soft power. And when you ask them, how did you invent soft power? They will say, we invented the United Nations, October 1945. And I was reading and I said, okay, if they invented an organization in October 1945, the Brits invented the Arab League, March 1945. So they invented the Arab League 6 months before the United Nations. So they were doing soft power with the Arab world before the word even existed. So that's the history of soft power. But I'm going to give a local example. If you are in Manchester, imagine me walking in Manchester in October, we are in October 2008. And I said to anyone in the street, do you know where is Etihad? Probably they will say, oh, speak English, you bloody foreigner. So, but now, if I walk in Manchester and I say the word Etihad, or I say anything bad about Etihad, the same people might take it as I am insulting them. And that's Arabic soft power in modern days. And I think the UK is missing a lot when it comes to soft power. Yes, we are talking about BBC, and by the way, I was reading an article and I was listening to one of MP, I think Afra, this morning, and she said many BBC premises in many different countries, not in the Arab world, the BBC is going out and the Russian are going into the same buildings. That's how the UK not paying attention to new soft power by the Russian, by the Chinese. But when it comes to the MENA region, I believe the Arab world is changing. And by the way, Charlotte, I was talking to my daughter last week and trying to give her an advice. And at the end, I said, what do you think? She said, I think you really need to learn when to stop, because I lost you. So if I talk too much, please stop me, because I'm sometimes... so if we talk about the soft power today, I think the current government manifesto talk about soft power and say, oh, we need to pay more attention and we need to invest more. But in reality, they are not. In reality, everything is against soft power when it comes to the UK. If we're going to talk about London and what we do, for example, the previous government and this government, they scrapped tax-free shopping in London. And tax-free shopping is pushing too many Arabic tourists, Chinese, Indian, American, away to go to Madrid, to Milan, to Paris, to do their shopping. And then when I work with the Knightsbridge Partnership, and one time they spoke to the government, and the government said, oh, we are saving £500 million every year in tax-free shopping, and that's why we scrapped it. In reality, the country is losing 2 billion from tax-free, not from the Arab visitors, but in general. And that is, for me, I think this is soft power. If you want to attract these people, you can't just ignore the fact. It's very, very important to make sure the students still coming here, the visitors are coming here, they're spending money. London School of Economics events last year talked about how Qatari students have spent up to £1 billion last year in the UK. And now, is it the same for the students, the Arab students? Is it as easy as coming here as before? I think no, it's not, and I think the country need to do more. And when I say the country, I don't mean the government, everyone. What's left to the UK? And I think the soft power comes with two other powers. It comes with hard power. Let me explain it in one word. So hard power is army. The UK no longer the strongest army. economy, and the UK is no longer the strongest economy. And soft power is influence, and the UK is no longer have that influence. What is left in the Arab world? I think the love people in the Arab world have for London and the UK. And that's not enough if you don't show them that they are welcome here and they need to come here and spend their money, and don't push them to go to Paris to spend their money and come back to stay for 1 or 2 nights in London hotels. And the tax-free shopping affects not just hotels and luxury, affect the restaurants down the road, affect the cafes, the people who work in transport, the people who work, the London taxi drivers. And I think it's very, very important for everyone to see the importance of the Arab contribution to London economy. Thank you, Charlotte.
Omar, thank you very much. I'm going to come to Tony Davis now, who has prepared for us a short video just telling his story, and it's really quite something. So if I can get the PowerPoint to work.
My name's Tony Davis. I'm a former soldier who served 22.5 years in the British Army. During my time that I was a visiting traineeship at the prestigious Royal Military Academy Sandhurst, and this is where I met His Highness Sheikh Khaled. I boxed for the Army and Great Britain, trying to qualify for the Olympic Games in Athens in 2004. However, it was just my teammate Amir Khan that qualified. I went straight into work for GB Boxing. And now I'm the national coach of Bahrain and technical development manager.
There's a bloke with a knife.
I can't imagine what the last 24 hours have been like for you. First of all, just explain to us, so why were you at Westminster yesterday?
We were part of British Lionhearts boxing team who are about to take on Italian Thunder tonight at York Hall. What we normally do is we go and do a community activity, PR event, which was taking place for an hour in the House of Commons.
And so, at the moment the attack struck, whereabouts were you precisely?
So we were just leaving the exit, which I guess is sort of parallel to where the crash happened. At this moment of time, I had my phone out. I was taking footage, for social media, good visit to the House of Commons. I didn't realise there was a crash then at that time, but I heard a fracas. And
because you thought it was a demonstration at first?
Yeah, I thought it was a student demonstration, because lots of people were running and they were coming around towards the gate. And we were on the side of the barrier making our way to the exit to get onto the coach. And then all of a sudden I seen some large chap brandishing 2 knives come through the gate, start attacking the policeman. At that point then, just instinct kicked in, leapt over the fence, because obviously that guy needed assistance. That tragic event obviously will stay with me for life. I went through a media frenzy in 24 hours. Barely a day goes by without it flashing up in your mind. His Highness got wind of the incident at Westminster, called me, and then flew me out to Bahrain, where he offered me a role and wanted me to set up boxing. The 30th of November 2018 was my last day at GB Boxing, and the very next day I flew to Bahrain. 29th of June 2019, we set about putting the first boxing event on, where we had 30 bouts across all classifications, all ages, both male and female. It was a mammoth day, and a lot of people turned out to it from the top to the bottom, and we called that event the Battle of Bahrain. It was quite a successful event, and that sort of paved the way to what we're doing now. We move into 2021, where we were allowed to go and participate in our first event. An unfortunate incident hit myself, where I contracted COVID, and I should have been in Istanbul for 6 days, but I was there for 6 weeks, via 2 hospitals, via intensive care unit, and it was pretty touch and go. So I'm pretty happy to be here right now.
Now, just want you to get back to see your wife and kids, and yeah, wish you all the best. And it's inspirational to see all the things that you've done, all the things that you've achieved in life. I mean, this is definitely up there to overcome something as horrible as that you've overcome, mate. Got nothing but respect for you, mate. Got nothing but respect for you.
Having just set up the federation after a year and a half or so, we did the unthinkable, which was to qualify for the Tokyo Olympic Games.
There will be one Bahraini boxer in Tokyo, and that man is Big Dennis Latipov, and he's there because of one man and one man only. Former GB boxer, one of the best members of the GB training scene, Mr. Tony Davis, who was headhunted, taken to Bahrain in 2018, who transformed and invented amateur boxing in the kingdom, who gave the Bahrainis something to look forward to, who took Danis Lapitov all around the world, took him to tournaments, got him the experience. That was Tony Davis driving that.
Although it was a bit bittersweet because of the old COVID situation. I didn't realise that even though the Olympics would be put back a year, that the COVID situation would have a direct impact on myself. The Olympics was a bit bittersweet because it took me probably about 12 months to recover from COVID. Bahrain went to the World Combat Games in Riyadh 2023, and Bahrain finished in first place. They came top with 3 gold medals and came out on top, which was very successful for our Bahraini team. The first ever national championship, I mean, you've got to be thinking that for the first time ever, I can become national champion. 2024, we staged the first national boxing championships in Bahrain. The reason for that is it takes a number of years, once you start to introduce a sport, it takes a number of years to grow before then you can start staging the national championships. So we did that male and female of the elite and youth categories, and some of those boxers that became national champions, the first ever Kingdom of Bahrain national champions, will go down in the history books. On the sort of back end of the COVID debacle, His Highness and I sort of had a little brainstorm together and came up with an event which I give the name to Royal Rumble. I give them 4 options: do it with domestic boxers, our neighbours Saudi or the UAE, or we bring a British military team over, especially with the Kingdom of Bahrain being under British rule back in the day. We brought out my old regiment actually, so it was about trying to give something back. Since then we brought in Royal Rumble 2, brought the Parachute Regiment over, and last year we brought the Royal Engineers over. And then this year we've won one better by bringing the actual UK Armed Forces. So these will be the best boxers from the military coming over to be pitted against our guys. It's not just about the boxing, it's about the whole event and what it stands for. It's cementing those Bahraini-Anglo relationships. We have a great relationship with the British Embassy. It just kind of strengthens that relationship, and not only that, there's many offcuts to it in terms of, with some of the regiments we brought over, we've done military training with them, with Bahrain Royal Guard and obviously the Parachute Regiment, the Royal Regiment of Fusiliers, etc. So, there's just so much more that is part of the whole concept as opposed to just the sporting entity. I think the UK and MENA have their own strengths, whether it be in the UK, the education elements, and healthcare, etc. And whereby MENA, maybe tourism, agriculture, trade, etc. I've seen so much of a change, especially in this beautiful kingdom. Long may it prosper. The best thing that we can do is using the vehicle of sport to try and tie that in, and a lot of people, especially from the UK, don't really know where Bahrain is. They have to look at the map, and once they've been here, they are left with a everlasting impression.
So, good afternoon, Ambassador, ladies and gentlemen.
First and foremost, I'd just like to thank Charlotte for inviting me to speak on this. A little bit different for me. I have to apologise that there's no subtitles, especially with me being from Newcastle. I hope everyone can understand. So I'd just like to say thank you very much, and I hope that video gives a little bit of a, a bit of a story of how things can happen in life and what can be done in MENA and the UK. Thank you.
Tony, thank you very much. That's such a story. I think only a video like that could really do it justice. Finally, Nicholas Hopton, I'm going to come to you. You're a diplomat. You now run the Middle East Association, which is its whole purpose is to build relationships between the UK and the MENA region. Can I ask you to say a few words on your perspective on soft power in Britain?
Thank you very much, Charlotte. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to be here with you all this afternoon. I think I'm going to react in a moment to what Omar and Tony have been setting out for us about their examples of soft power in action. Perhaps place it a little bit in the perspective of how the UK sits in Middle Eastern perspectives, if not in our own eyes sometimes, and finish with a few examples of where I, as a diplomat and ambassador, I've seen soft power, British soft power, working very well. And just initially kicking off, it's a phrase that we use a lot, soft power now. We use it very casually. Those of you of my ancient vintage and older will be aware that before 2000 it was an unusual phrase. You didn't really hear it in the context of international relations until Professor Joe Nye, put it on the world stage as a very easy way of understanding a whole raft of international relations and how governments do business, which hadn't really been encapsulated so neatly before. And so what is soft power? I mean, just two words on that, because I think it helps us understand the discussion we're having. And I know many of you in the room are involved in soft power, so it'd be great to hear in the Q&A discussion about any of those aspects which you personally are driving forward. But soft power is basically defined by what it isn't, in my eyes. This isn't the Joe Nye definition, this is the Nick Hopton version, which is basically that soft power is everything that's not hard power. And we're all very, very conscious of what hard power is. We're seeing it on our TV screens all the time at the moment. And we're living in a hard power world, which hasn't always been the case. It goes in phases. So soft power encompasses a whole range of activities and aspects of relations between countries and peoples that is not directly related to the exercise of hard power, military power, security, intelligence, sharp, pointy stuff. And I've spent quite a lot of my career in pointy places, dangerous places, where even in those places you can exercise soft power. So that's just to put it in context. I will happily, during the Q&A, tell you a bit about the Middle East Association, which is my passion at the moment, what I'm running, this organisation. If anyone's interested, I'm very happy to explain a bit more about that. But for these opening remarks, let me just give a few thoughts on what Omar and Tony have just been setting out, because, of course, they have shown you a combination of how business soft power, commercial soft power, and sport and culture are very powerful tools. And it was great to hear both your histories about how you've done that and the impact it's had. It's very real. And sitting next to a former GB boxer, I'm going to watch my words very carefully for obvious reasons. But I want to just tell you a story of where I saw these elements that you have both talked about come together in a beautiful way and with a slightly comic ending. 10 years ago, I was ambassador in Qatar, and one moment, this was a period when the British government was actually doing soft power pretty well in the Gulf. There was an initiative called the Gulf Initiative, led by William Hague primarily when he was Foreign Secretary. And as part of that, one evening I had a reception in the residence gardens and found that among my guests I had Lord Marland, Jonathan Marland, former Trade Minister, Alan Shearer, needs no introduction, former England football and Newcastle manager, among other things, and the other guest who was unmistakable was Lennox Lewis, former world heavyweight boxing champion. So I had these three great men, and in welcoming the guests, we didn't have a podium, but we stood all on a low wall in front of the garden where all the guests were, a couple of hundred people. And it was a wonderful evening, and each of them said a few words, and they were soft power encapsulated. They demonstrated the projection, because the reaction was incredibly positive from all the diplomatic, Qatari and British guests present. And it was going really well, and I was thinking, this is great. Here we are, we've got the encapsulation of sport elitism, the elite of sport, British sport, and also business, all standing on a wall together until the wall broke. And we all tumbled off the wall, and the reason the wall broke was because Lennox Lewis was just too big and too heavy for the wall. Now, I don't know if you've ever met Lennox Lewis, but I think Tony gives you an idea of how big top boxers really are, and I think Lennox is probably even bigger than you, isn't he? Yeah, anyway, so that's where I saw it all coming together very beautifully. And, you know, I think what Omar is doing with business and culture and events, bridging, two words I would associate with soft power. Often we think about what can we get out of Britain's soft power, you know? What can we do with Britain's soft power for the benefit of the nation, but also for British economy and so forth. That's leveraging, and that's a very important part of soft power. You've got to leverage it. But I would say equally important, and I was talking to my daughter last night, who is a portrait painter and has exhibited, as has my wife, art in the Middle East and elsewhere. And I was talking to them what they thought of soft power, and my daughter said, actually, it's all about bridging. It's about exposing people to influences and ways of seeing things which aren't their day-to-day natural stuff, so that they can come together more closely and work together better and understand each other better. And of course, there's an aspect of that is conflict prevention and de-escalation of conflict, better understanding. Some people might call it diplomacy, but it's a complex thing. And that got me thinking, so two really important aspects of soft power to hold in mind. One, bridging. One, leveraging. And we can explore that if that's useful. I was going to give you a kind of detailed expose on how Britain is seen in the region, and I'm just going to rattle through it. You're all familiar with the history of the UK over the last century in the Middle East, and just starting, you know, from 100 years ago with the mandate following Sykes-Picot Agreement. Britain has played a very major role in the region, and I would argue is still an influential and important player in the Middle East, but we often undersell ourselves. And maybe that's coming back to the central theme of this talk. If we're underselling ourselves, how can we do better? And why is it that we're underselling ourselves? Both to the detriment of our leveraging power, but also our bridging power through our soft power skills and experience. So I think at this particular point, we're in an interesting phase because over the last decade, the UK has been very withdrawn, very internally focused. I've seen this from inside government and outside government. There are lots of reasons for that, good reasons. But I think we often forget that actually in the Middle East, and those of you from the region can correct me if I'm wrong, but in the Middle East, generally there is a much more consistent perception of what the UK is and what it stands for and why it's an important player still. Which isn't always understood in the country, our country itself. And it's a generally positive balance sheet. We've got lots wrong. A lot of our policies have been misguided, and some of them have been catastrophic. But overall, the UK stands in a good position in the Middle East. People want to partner with us. People still want to engage with Britain. And it's up to us to take that into a new phase. Now, just to finish off, and again I can expand on any of this in the Q&A if interesting. There are certain tools at the disposal of the British government you'll be familiar with. There's the BBC World Service having its budgets cut, closed down various language services. This is a great example of shooting ourselves in the foot when we damage our BBC Arabic service, which is listened to by many people in the region as being a source of truth and impartial journalism. But also the British Council, and I've worked very much with them over my career and have a huge admiration for British Council colleagues. Many of you will be familiar with the Council. It's gone through a lot of changes, and where it is today, I was just checking where it is at the moment, because one doesn't hear a lot about the Council these days. But partially, it is a tool of the British government, and it receives 16% of its budget from the British government, which is £163 million a year. Now, that sounds a lot of money, but in the scheme of things, that's not a lot of money, neither in business nor governmental terms. 163 million a year, and that's of that British government contribution, 85% of it is mandated by the government that it has to go on development work. So it's actually not doing what we tend to think of soft power, British Council being at the forefront of British soft power overseas. It's not leveraging and pushing and promoting our culture and our values as in the broadest possible sense. It does promote a certain narrow set of values which are mainly diversity and inclusion focused. But I think it could be doing much, much more to promote the UK arts, culture, education. It does a lot on education. That's where it makes its money, through English language training and exams. So that's the council, and I find that a bit sad, that if you look at the British Council website, it isn't what you might expect it to be. I think it needs a little bit of support and refocusing. And just to finish off, Charlotte, I probably use my time, but I've seen British soft power exercised brilliantly, and often it's been ad hoc, and those of us in the room who have been diplomats or are still diplomats will be aware how often the best initiatives come out of nowhere and are made up on the spot, and they can have real impact. I'll just give you a few quick examples of that. As a very young diplomat in Morocco, in 1992, the UK had the presidency of the so-called European Communities, as it was then, became the European Union later. And this rotating presidency between countries gave us an opportunity to showcase the UK locally in Rabat. And it's a long story, but Tony will be proud of me. I brought a band who were a kind of rock and roll cover band from Newcastle, a bunch of Geordie musicians, and they came down and they played in Rabat in the Mohammed V Theatre. And it was, what's special about that, you might think? Well, there hadn't been a rock and roll band in Rabat, I don't think ever. This was 1992, it's 30 plus years ago. In those days, music and tours by bands and things were not so straightforward or global. The theatre was full of young Moroccans, and it was aired live on Moroccan radio and TV. And it was extraordinary because the Lost Boys, this band was called the Lost Boys, were not a big band in the UK. They played events. But they were great, they were professional, and they were stars in Morocco for a night. And that associated in the minds of thousands, probably, of young Moroccans, the UK as being attractive, modern, may not seem very modern, rock and roll, but modern, dynamic, and driving culture forward in a way they hadn't been used to. Last two quick stories, if I may, Charlotte. Bobby Charlton, another famous sportsman from Tony's neck of the woods, came to Morocco, again on a last-minute initiative, for very little expenditure. He ran a football school, and because I was originally born in this city, and I'm a Red, and although I'm keeping it quite quiet at the moment, being a Manchester United fan, it was a life dream to bring Bobby Charlton to Morocco, so I brought him out. And he was presented, the ambassador, my ambassador knew nothing about football, wasn't very interested, but he was asking me, who's this Bobby Charlton? it was Bobby Charlton, the man who scored goals in the World Cup final, European Cup final, and so on. And I had to explain to him, yeah, he is a great global icon. And the ambassador agreed that I could give him a flight and bring him out to Morocco. He could do a bit of training with local schools, and this would be a kind of preparing the ground for a visit by the Prince of Wales, now King Charles III, a few weeks later, and a big trade fair in Casablanca that was happening soon after. And Bobby Charlton came, and we played football with youngsters in Rabat and in Casablanca. He trained, he went on TV, and he was a massive success. And I dare to say it, I'll get sent to the tower and my head cut off, but he had a bigger impact than the king, future king, when he came afterwards. And that just showed to me the impact of sport, as Tony's also demonstrated very, very well before. So I think I'll stop there. There's much more I could say, but I think this is a neglected part of the British government's responsibility. And so much of it is taken forward by the private sector, people like Omar in particular, and Tony, and individuals, the music industry, but actually the government has a role to play. And whether that's through funding the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, British Film, BBC World Service, the British Council, giving them enough money, they don't need a lot. None of these initiatives I've talked about cost very much money. It really doesn't cost a lot to promote soft power, but you do need to be consistent, and you need to be clear about what you're doing and why you're doing it, and it's because it stops you having to use your hard power. And if you can do anything to stop having to use military power, it's a much cheaper and more effective long-term way of going about things. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Nick. Tony, I think, has got something to ask. I'm going to abuse my chairman's prerogative and ask a question, and then I'm going to open it up to the floor. But Tony, I think you have a response.
Yeah, sorry, Nick. So I believe I've been to Casablanca 3 times, most recently with the British Lionhearts. So you are the guy that's responsible for the thousands of kids that play football on the beach every single day, I think.
Well, I think it's Bobby Charlton, not me, but thank you.
Well, you brought him over.
Well, certainly he had an impact. And when I saw Morocco get to the semi-finals of the World Cup in 2022, I thought, wow, those kids would have been those players would have been too young to be in those training sessions we had, you know, with street kids just kicking balls around with Bobby Charlton, who was in his element. He loved it with these kids who had a football and not a lot else. They would have been older than the players in the World Cup. But the fact that Morocco was in the semi-finals of the World Cup finals, people like Bobby Charlton certainly contributed to that. So that's great to hear, Tony.
It sounds as if there is a lot of good stuff going on, but we're very British and we sort of apologise to everyone and don't talk about it very much. Everyone's touched slightly on my question, which is the role of the royal family. So, Tony, the royal family, the Royal Rumble, the concept of 2 kingdoms, seems to be important. I know that His Royal Highness the King of Bahrain had a very good relationship with Her late Majesty. Is that something that you find a bonding thing between 2 kingdoms? Is our royal families important?
Yeah, I believe so. And I did witness many times. I'll have been in Bahrain 7 years on the 1st of December, and seeing His Majesty come over quite regularly to the UK, and obviously meeting Her Majesty, I just think it's phenomenal. And you know, a little bit more closer to home, His Highness Sheikh Khaled, I see it day in and day out in the Kingdom of Bahrain, how he goes around, you know, attending sporting events, and all the young kids, you know, come up, and you know, he's very welcoming and receptive. Not only that, when we come over each year, and we're doing it for the 3rd time this year on the 6th of November, I will bring my team across to box at the home of the British Army now in Catterick, North Yorkshire, where we take on the British Army for the 3rd time, and he comes up actually, and which is, you know, not the normal and normal sporting events in Bahrain. So very much active and very good. I mean, I've seen His Majesty the King of the Kingdom of Bahrain, and we sat with him for about 25 minutes one time, you know, and very, very influential. And I think both, you know, seeing the relationship between both royal families is huge.
Omar, I think you have.
Yeah, two things. I want to add something about the British Council, what Nick said, and also maybe other government departments. I think, yes, they really need more funding, but I think people there still have the old mentality of doing things. And they try, I don't know, I'm talking about our experience, try to reach to some of these people who are dealing with the Arab world, and it's always a mission impossible to do anything because there is too many people need to get involved and to approve things and to do things. Sometimes a very small project will take ages, and that's why you don't do anything with them. You just straight away go to the private sector, and you find it very easy, and you have a great project that they want to be involved with later on. For the royal family, let me say, since we started, we always try to find people from the British government to come to our event, and it's always difficult. They're always busy. Government, Conservative or Labour, they're always busy. But until we had Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Edinburgh, she came to one of our events, and then after that, the government are interested to come, and that's soft power. So yes, the royal family are, I think, the only soft power that's really playing a vital part now at the moment. PP services, for me, maybe I could be wrong, but I don't think that's the same role they were playing before. And embassies, and I think I'm going to compare British embassies in the Arab world to Arab embassies here in the UK, for example. Since Sheikh Fawaz, the Dean of the Arab Ambassadors, took charge of the Council of the Arab Ambassadors, there's too many initiatives that the embassy want to get involved with. Same initiatives that we are trying to promote London and bring more Arabs to London from the Arab world. British embassies in the Arab world are difficult sometimes to work with because they are restricted in what they can do, not because they don't want to do the job. And I think that's another thing. Maybe you disagree with me, Nick.
No, I wouldn't disagree with that. I think the role of an embassy is slightly different. A large part of it can be supporting soft power initiatives, but actually it isn't necessarily the central focus of an embassy's work or an ambassador's work. It's often some of the most fun bits. When I arrived in Qatar in 2013, I was lucky enough to inherit a year-long initiative called the Qatar British Year of Culture. And this was run by the British Council, but with strong embassy support. It was a great partnership. It was an example for me of when the British Council can be at its best. And every week there were new events, there were British writers being brought out by the Council who had relevant stories to tell. There were a whole range of cultural activities taking place all the time. And the two ministers for culture, Ed Vaizey was our minister for culture during that period, Lord Vaizey now, and his opposite number was Dr. Al-Kawari, who is still a very important figure in Qatar. And they spent so much time together. Most of the activity was in Qatar. And the embassy obviously was supporting this constantly. So I've seen it work. I've seen the embassies supporting it. It's very stretching for a small or medium-sized embassy to do that kind of thing. But it worked then, I think, because of what you said, Omar. We weren't constrained. We were given a budget, and the council was given a budget, and then we were told to get on with it. And of course, the Qatari government also put money into it. So we were able to run a fantastic program which covered the whole range of soft power activity, including business, including culture, music, and sport. So that was a great example. It can work.
I'd like to open it up to questions from the floor. If I miss you, I'll take one at a time, unless we run out of time. If I miss you, just wave your hand a bit, and I'm going to go from the front backwards. So, lady here, and have we got a roving mic?
Doesn't matter. I think.
Oh, we've got a roving mic. We need to pick you up on the. We're making a podcast of this, so.
Oh, okay.
There we are. Thank you, Elliot.
Elma Mattock from the Royal Town of Sutton Coldfield. I was in a Fringe meeting earlier on this morning where Nadeem Zadawi, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, was commenting about the criteria for being a good diplomat. And he was saying that currently CVs, they don't put what languages they are, what people's languages they have. It's all blank. So do you think there should be an overhaul of what are the right criteria for being a diplomat? Should there be an overhaul so that we get good diplomats in? Look at the Mendelssohn case, who can, and these can then promote soft power everywhere, because I do think in the last 15 years it's gone downhill. Thank you.
That's obviously a question for
That's
Tony,
for Nick.
I think. No? Thank you, Tony. Well, you mentioned the Mendelssohn case. I think if we had Mendelssohn as an ambassador, he would be very good on soft power, as opposed to Peter Mendelssohn. But sorry, that's an aside. I think you're on a very good point, as is Nadeem Zakawi. And I have made similar arguments to colleagues who are now running former colleagues who are now running the Foreign Office. And the thrust of it is, does Britain want, we're on the record, aren't we?
We're on the record. It's going to be podcast, so watch out what you say.
So the thrust of it is, does Britain want to have an international department that does the whole range of international relations across the board in a very kind of Panglossian way, or does it want a diplomatic service? And I'm afraid to say that at times, at the moment, it sometimes looks like we've got an international department. And it's largely because, and I'm happy to say this on the record, it's largely because the merger of the Development Department, DFID, and the Foreign Office was not handled in the best way possible. Went on too long. In many ways, it's still going on 5 years later. No change management should last very long. It should be short, sharp, brutal. Everyone knows where they stand, and you create something new and better as a result. This has been almost the exact opposite of that. So I think we have great diplomats in the Foreign Office, but we don't have a very clearly focused diplomatic service. I'll be very interested if any of my current diplomatic colleagues are interested to comment on this, but from their experience. But the Turkish diplomatic service is an excellent example of a foreign service which has which is very clear about why it's there and what it's working for. It's working for the Turkish national interest. And I think that the British Foreign Office at its best moments, and it has been reputed as being a good one of the best in the past, has been that because it has the right people, points to your criteria, who are there for the right reasons and are very clear-sighted that they have a role primarily to promote the British national interest. I'm not sure that's the case at the moment. Thanks.
Lady in the green jacket.
Hi, Lois from the BBC.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to... Oh, okay, of course.
Lois from the BBC World Service, thank you for the shout out. I'm interested to hear the panel's views on the fact that the world is more dangerous and more competitive, yet the public are extremely focused on local issues. So how do we make sure that the public are on side and more informed about our soft power output?
Who would like to answer us?
I think I was listening to one of the MPs this morning, and he answered your question. He said sometimes it's very difficult when he knocks on doors somewhere in the country, and people come outside and ask him, oh, why do we pay this amount of money to a country who have a space program? And he said that's the problem when the public doesn't understand why our soft power work without naming any countries. It's very difficult, and it's very hard to explain the public the reason behind this. And I think that's why the UK soft power, I think I don't believe of these ranks. They said number 2 in the world, which is, I don't think so. So I think that's why the UK is left behind, either in the Arab world or maybe in Europe or by the Americans.
And Your Excellency, I think you have a comment.
So
so much. It's not an exchange of commendations, let's say, but we also think that the British diplomacy is one of the historic, strong examples of international diplomacies in the world. Obviously, the term soft power is invented by an American scholar, as you just highlighted, but he just conceptualized it. Soft power has been there for probably centuries. I have two takeaways personally. One is, historically speaking, in some cases you have a huge capital, positive capital, when you are dealing with third countries because of your historical reality, right? So as a Turkish diplomat, for instance, if I meet with a British national of Somali origin, let's say, or Pakistani origin, the time when I say I'm Turkish, there is just this quick link that brings these people very much close to us. So there is an inevitable positive capital over there. But in certain cases, you have to work hard because the baggage is heavy. The baggage is negative. But the good news is, another takeaway, soft power is not something constantly positive or constantly negative. You can build it. I think the governments can work on it to try to build it, but most of the time it happens itself with a collective effort. The good example is the Turkish presence or understanding in the Balkans, for example. So when you ask a Muslim living in the Balkans, it can be a Bosnian or an Albanian or a Kosovar, they will have a positive understanding when you say Turkish. It's because of the shared history and probably closeness of the identity. But when you talk with an Orthodox Balkan, be it a Serb or a Greek or Bulgarian, you might have issues. And during the Cold War, it was so heavy because this reality was conflated with the current reality of the time, when there were two blocks and the Russians were actually somehow supporting these sentiments. But after the end of the Cold War, for example, it was my first posting in Bulgaria. That's why I was someone so lucky to observe this firsthand. The whole understanding of Turk in Bulgaria, for example, has changed dramatically to the positive sense. People were watching Turkish soap operas, people were trading with Turkey, people were seeing Turkey as an important ally within NATO. So Bulgarian soldiers and Turkish soldiers working together. So all in all, I guess this is a phenomenon that you have to work constantly to build. Even if you have a positive capital in terms of soft power in a particular place, it's not given. It's like reputation. It takes too much effort to build it, but you can lose it immediately. And obviously, in a setting like Middle East, as a country which belongs both to the Middle East as much as we belong to Europe, I guess this is so visible and vibrant as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Your Excellency, thank you very much indeed. We're very privileged to have insights from diplomat in the room and former diplomat. Gentleman in the fourth row there, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for a very interesting panel so far. I start the question with a reference to last week. The Tony Blair Institute for Global Change had a seat at the table of the Gaza negotiations in the White House. And I think that is part of a broader trend across the Middle East in particular, and you could of course say worldwide too, in terms of private institutions almost subsuming a diplomatic role. And I could name a number of other organizations that have the ear of Arab leaders much closer than I think the Foreign Office do in some cases. I would be curious as to see what your perspective is, both in terms of a diplomatic angle, but also the private sector as well, of the opportunities and risks of that trend.
Nick, do you want to?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily a new phenomenon. I think you're absolutely right to flag that private individuals, particularly those who've been in positions of power or senior business leaders, do play an important role at the moment. And you put your finger on one instance very, very well. But I think that's often been the case in the past, and it's largely, at the moment it's very visible because of the latest US plan, which has actually named, to Tony Blair as a potential member of a committee that might oversee Gaza under President Trump's chairmanship. Whatever one thinks about that plan, that's been put out there, and that is at the centre of a discussion and negotiation happening in Cairo today. And let's all, fingers crossed, hope very much and pray that this leads to a ceasefire and the return of the hostages and further steps towards a sustainable peace. And I think it will take a lot of prayers to move it in that direction, but it's not impossible. It's a moment. It's probably the best moment there's been since October 2023. You can go back in history and you can always find influential individuals. And in fact, diplomacy between international relations between governments, until very recently, was conducted by individuals on behalf of powerful rulers. They'd often send off someone. So the Steve Witkoffs of the world at the moment are not an unusual phenomenon. It's a bit unusual for the United States to be playing with the two biggest conflicts in the world, engaging with them, with real estate tycoons who haven't obvious diplomatic experience, but good luck to them. And in the past, that's happened many times, including, I just look back at my predecessors in Iran 200 years ago. The diplomacy between the United Kingdom and the Qajar dynasty in Iran was conducted by individuals who just happened to be close to the monarchy or to the prime minister, and we didn't have a diplomatic service in the same way that one thinks of it now. The Foreign Office was really a construction of the 1860s by Lord Palmerston. So it's a relatively recent thing. And the nation state, of course, didn't exist in the same way as we know it now. So I don't think it's unusual historically. It's a bit unusual at the moment, but if you've got the choice between having influential individuals at the top table from your country, whether private operators or representing the UK government, especially if that private individual will be liaising closely with senior British government officials and the Foreign Office, I would go for that any day over being excluded from the top table.
Thanks very much, Nick. Gentlemen in the public room, and I can see two questions at the back as well. I'll come to you after that. Thank you.
Just for the panel as a whole, is it the case that soft power is both tangible and non-tangible, number one? And are we living in an era where budgetary pressures tend to decide how we think about the future, especially as UK PLC?
So, Tony, I'll come to you. How tangible do you think soft power is? Is it something you can really sense, or is it just something that hangs in the air?
I believe there's many forms you can do, isn't it? I mean, you've seen sort of the story I've come up with, and you can always find a way to try and target that, in one sense. So, yeah, I guess it depends on, which direction you want to go in, over many different aspects.
I would add, Omar, do you want to?
I'll get Omar.
No, Nick.
Well, it's just what they call two-finger, very quick intervention. I mean, I think in your world, Tony, soft power can be very tangible if someone lands a fist on you. That's tangible. But the wider influence of a major boxing competition where you have a Bahraini fighter on the world stage representing Bahrain, projecting Bahrain to the world in a new way, in a positive way, that's very difficult to quantify. That's intangible. So it can be both things at once, I would say.
Yeah, and especially giving them the education as well. And obviously we have two different religions over there, and it took me a while to understand what was going on. I've served, Northern Ireland for many years, and it's a bit different in a different environment, and it did take me a while to understand what was going on, but we quickly tackled that with the help and support of the embassy, and we've started going into the sort of majority, of the Shia side, and we've tried to tackle head on. And I think by using this vehicle of sport and education and empowering them, to become better people, and with pride, to represent the Kingdom of Bahrain.
There may be a whole separate session we could do on the power of sport to build bridges between different communities. Omar?
Yeah, I just wanted to answer it with an example I've seen last summer. I was walking in Westfield in London, and I saw a white kid wearing a Nasser, the Saudi club. So I stopped the mother. I said, do you mind if I ask you, are you from the Arab world? She said, no, we are from Eastern Europe. I said, why he's wearing this? She said, because he loves Ronaldo. So that's, I think, will answer your question.
There's a lady in the red scarf, Charlotte.
My name's Charlotte Eager, and I run something called the Trojan Women Project, which is a soft power project in many ways. It's a combined psychosocial support and strategic communications project for refugees and asylum seekers. And we run drama workshops with them. And then we put on plays very publicly, and we make films of our work. And our films have won awards, and through our films, our work and the refugees' voices are studied at universities all over the world. And we started off in Jordan working with Syrians about 13 years ago. And we're about to start a new project with Palestinians. We've been asked by a major donor to put this together. And I am looking for actually ideas and support, because we're going to do it remotely with drama workshops in various different Palestinian communities in the Middle East, but also in the UK. Our lead actress, who we work with regularly, is a Syrian-Palestinian actress based in the UK. So I'm looking for people who have ideas for drama workshops locally, little NGOs we could partner with. I'm not going to run a drama workshop in Gaza, clearly that's very dangerous, but we'll find an out-of-work actor who wants to do it and get paid. And this is about providing work, professional work, for Palestinian theatre professionals in their home countries. And we'll film that and project it onto a screen here in the UK. And then we'll also put the play on here as well. So it's a mixture of remote footage filmed in advance, built into the play with live performance here. And we've toured with the Young Vic. This is all done at quite a high artistic level. So I'd be interested in any advice on how to get these partner projects, and also potentially other donors coming in, people in the private sector who might be interested in helping us, or people in the Arab world.
Charlotte, thank you. I don't know if any of the panellists have any thoughts immediately, but we've got the right people in the room, and perhaps we can connect up afterwards if anyone in the audience has any ideas on how we can help.
Well, it'd be really brilliant. This really is a soft power project. I mean, our stuff has been literally studied at Harvard and Oxford and Cambridge, and has won loads of awards. So it's getting the voices out there. And it was inspired by two soft power projects that I saw in Sarajevo when I was a young war correspondent there many years ago. And of all the things that we gave the Sarajevans, the things they were most grateful for were Susan Sontag waiting for Godot, U2 coming and doing a concert, and then there was a very famous football match, and I can't remember which team it was, but I loved that as well. There were some British people who turned up. So any support on that would be great.
Another gentleman in the back row, I think. Yes.
Hello, Andrew Will from Altrincham. I'm not a diplomat. I'm a retired engineer. My question, does soft power include correcting blatantly incorrect media messages? For example, especially messages that are disadvantageous to the UK. I'll give you an example, and it applies both in the UK and in the media. Especially, I said I was going to say Indian media, but I'm sure it's not just Indian media. One small example is the misquoting of the Balfour Declaration. It's disadvantageous because it's effectively blaming the current situation in the Middle East on Britain. Now, the Balfour Declaration was very clear in its writing. Only the first section is ever quoted, which gives the impression that Britain was the cause of the problem. It blatantly isn't. Why don't you quote or correct the quote and say, well, the full context and quote is this? But, yeah, why not? Why don't you correct incorrect media messages?
Okay, I thought you were going to look at me.
It's an easy one.
Well, I think it's a really interesting point, and it's in a way, just trying to think it through. I'm not going to defend the Balfour Declaration. Equally, I'm not going to condemn it for the same reasons that you've just presented, that it's so often misrepresented. Whether it is, it has catalysed where the Middle East has got to now, or whether it would have happened anyway, that's a debate that historians need to have rather than us today. What I would say is I think the way that the Balfour Declaration has been misrepresented over the last century is largely due to the UK government either having ignored the need to present it properly at an earlier stage, or having lost the soft power PR battle at some stage along the way. And I think it's probably a combination of both of those, because I think for the first decades of following the Balfour Declaration, the UK government was acting under the mandate, along with the French in the Middle East, and then by the time that it woke up to the reality that the Balfour Declaration could result in a very different situation, it was too late, actually, to avoid descent into conflict and violence. As I say, that's a lot of history. But your question, whether government should seek to correct misrepresentation through soft power, I think some organisations have tried to do that. There is an organisation which, if you don't know it, called the Balfour Group, has tried to explain, and they've just recently changed their name to something more positive because it was seen as a pejorative name. But they, of course, are celebrating at the moment because they think that the recognition of Palestine as sovereignty is a step towards a recalibration and a better understanding of what the Balfour Declaration was all about. And that's part of the present British government's presentation of that decision as well, and part of its justification. Whether one agrees or not is a different question. But I don't think governments try to correct misunderstandings in that way. And when they do, it's normally too late.
I'm going to cut in. It's a fascinating question, and it makes me sort of ask the role of media in general, particularly in terms of polarization, which is what happens when social media and algorithms come together. And then one of the things that CMEC tries to do is help people understand the region, help Conservative parliamentarians understand the region by going there, because sometimes nothing replaces going there and seeing it and understanding what people's lives are like because you speak to them. So I've kind of got a question. To what extent do you think things like scholarships and helping young people study abroad is helpful in building a nation that understands other nations? And just secondly, to both Omar and Tony, what's been your experience, particularly, Tony, living in another place, getting, becoming part of the society there, and Omar, how does that help you understand the country? And for your sort of clients and people you operate with, for those from the Arab world coming to London, do you think coming to London and experiencing our brands and our way of life, does that help build bridges? I'll come to Omar first.
Okay, for me, 25 years, when I came to this country, I used to have some hair, so you can see the difference. Look, in 2015, if I remember correctly, it was a phone sold in Harrods and Selfridges called Virtue. And this phone, at that time, we were working with them. They were sponsoring some of the activities we're doing, and one time they asked us to ask the Arab visitors why they are interested in this phone. And one of the obvious answers we were getting from the Arab, and it was a very expensive phone to buy. It was very ugly, but very expensive, like £4,000 or something. And at that time, and one of the reasons they would say, because it says it's made in England. So they loved the fact that phone was made in England, and they loved the fact that they buy it only from the UK. It's not available anywhere else. And so for the Arabs who come here, they really, really appreciate everything come from the UK, and every institutions that try to show more of the Arab culture and engage with them. But that's, unfortunately, for the past few years, as I mentioned, the private sector is doing this. The government, the previous government and the current government are trying to push people away. They don't want people to come. As we know, there's too many taxes that's been changed recently. The inheritance tax. I know people will hear, oh, you know what? These people are the wealthy and they should pay tax. Unfortunately, if these people, I don't want to repeat what Farage said earlier, but If these people leave and they don't create jobs in central London, that will affect people in Manchester and Newcastle. And it is not just about London. These people come in and spend money in the country, not in the West End.
So for my sort of background, once I got to Bahrain and found that I was going to start working, I didn't really know what hit me. I'd been a couple of times before, but it was a bit like a tourist. But once I got there and I understood the sort of landscape, I quickly set about my job to try and make a difference. And the first thing was education, delivering education. And I thought that everyone was very hospitable and, you know, very welcoming and receptive. Not only just in Bahrain, but even in Saudi, even UAE and Qatar. So, and I found that they looked up to, you know, us Brits, should we say, and, you know, you just made a difference. And by empowering people, by giving them the education certificates, and, you know, it just made a, you know, a massive difference. And it's a kingdom what I now call my home. Bearing in mind, I just went on a 5-year contract initially, but now it's my home. So it's just very fascinating.
Have we got any more questions? Well, also, can we just let you get a mic so that we can hear you?
Connor, a while back, I ended up with, I think, something like 300,000-400,000 followers in India on a forum there, which I hadn't solicited the algorithm. There does seem to be a whole bunch of people in basically, one of the reasons I disengaged was a whole bunch of people trying to blame Britain for everything bad in India. British history in India is far from perfect. But I do wonder if we need to fight fire with fire. I just gave up arguing with them after a while. I learned a whole lot of Indian history, real and imagined. But should we have a bunch of people whose job it is to engage and actually fight the fight on social media? Because they're much, you know, the voices of the mad and the paid to be mad do seem to be outshouting the reasonable people. You know, should we actually be funding that sort of thing? I did amateur for a year. Should someone be doing this professionally, like Russia and China are doing?
If I just, you know, are you talking about TikTok, for example? No. You know what, the reason I ask, because I know, and now the TikTok gonna be in the hand of Trump. In TikTok, they have a feature where someone sitting behind a desk, and I've heard this from, it was actually in BBC, who can actually ask one content to go to 500,000 people in 5 minutes. So sometimes I don't think the argument is real. It's just, and the interest is not there, but it's just someone wanted that interest to be in front of you.
So it's kind of how do countries and democratic countries survive when democracy is so often driven by bots and algorithms and things that, and should we fight back? Nick, do you have a thought?
Just very briefly, given that we're on the record, I would just simply say I think certainly governments like ours take this very seriously, and I think there is a lot of resource put into it, and I think they do a pretty good job. But because of the huge effort made by countries which are inimical to our values and interests, as you said, that it's a constant struggle. But I think that, from my understanding, our government, whatever the political leadership, take this very seriously.
Have we got any more questions before we wrap up?
Can I just pick up on your education point, if
Please.
that's right? So you were asking about the importance of education, and Tony answered that to an extent. From all I would say is I totally agree. I think, and this is where the British Council gets it right, although it's having to do it through its own funding mechanisms rather than government support, promoting English language teaching and learning and exams around the world. That is one of our greatest soft power exports, the use of English. And it's an accident of history in some ways, but English is now the to use another term, lingua franca, which was the common global language, not just of diplomacy, but of power, before English became the common language. And it's a fairly recent shift, because I remember as a young diplomat going to meetings in Brussels in the early 90s, where French was the language. Even then, things were translated into English and German and Spanish and so on, but the dominant language was French. That shifted very rapidly, and a lot of that, of course, is because of the culture, the soft power of the United States, which has driven the use of English in its various forms as the common language. I just wanted to say one last thing on education, though, if that's all right, Charlotte, which is how the organisation I run, the Middle East Association, seeks to try and educate people in the UK about the importance of the UK's relationship with the Middle East. That's really what it is about, and we have a young professionals group, which is basically for any under 35s, and this is a free thing we offer, because we want to invest in the future, and we want the younger generation to understand how important the relationship between the UK and the Middle East is, and to understand it better, and to come back to the gentleman's point earlier, the gentleman from Altrincham, that, you know, to understand the realities of what the Balfour Declaration was and the whys and wherefores. And we do this through events and through, we're a membership organisation, but if anyone's interested in this, maybe when Charlotte circulates anything afterwards, she can attach a link to the Middle East Association information, and we'd love people to be involved if they're interested in that. Thanks.
Nick, thank you very much indeed. Before I finish, I just want to say thank you, obviously, to our audience. We've got an enormous amount of expertise in the audience. Your Excellency, it's wonderful to see you here, and representatives from the Embassy of the Kingdom of Bahrain. You're very, very welcome. Wonderful to see you here. We've mentioned the British Council. CMEC has been very honoured to do some podcasts in collaboration with the British Council to try and amplify their excellent work. So if you have a free 5 minutes, have a scroll through CMEC's website and have a look at some of our British Council podcasts. And I'm very, very pleased to have a representative from the BBC World Service. Loie, thank you very much for coming. You guys do amazing work, and I think we would all agree that the BBC World Service is an absolute jewel in our crown, which we should be supporting an awful lot more. But I really want to say thank you to our superb panellists who are living, breathing, putting Britain's place in the world and amplifying what's good about Britain. Omar, London Arabia, Tony Davis and Nicholas Hopton from the Middle East Association. You guys are doing amazing work, and it's not un-British to say you are absolutely great. So thank you very much indeed.